Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending upon where you are. We are hosting this webinar today to talk about the opportunity that is available for the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network to offer small grants. Next slide, Julia. So my name is Faye Taxman. I am the principal investigator for the JCOIN Coordination and Translation Center. Our center has 6 cores, and as part of JCOIN 2, we are offering a core devoted to really trying to provide opportunities for people to explore different research and practice through small grants. And that's the purpose of our discussion today. We're pleased to be able to have Laurie Ducharme, Dr. Ducharme, who is with the National Institute on Drug Abuse. She is also the science officer for the JCOIN initiative, both JCOIN 1 and JCOIN 2. And then we are also joined by our colleague, Dr. Howard Henderson, from Texas State University. Howard is leading the Technical Assistance Corps as part of JCOIN 2 for the Coordination and Translation Center. And he'll be talking about the assistance that we can give anyone who's interested in terms of learning how best to put together a JRIG application. And then the lead for our JRIG initiative is Dr. Judith Wild. Judith led the JCOIN 1 JRIG initiative, and she's leading JCOIN 2, so she's very familiar with all the policies and procedures. And, you know, she and Howard together can really help you, if you decide to pursue an application. In about 6 weeks, or I guess it's a little bit less, we will open up the application opportunity for JCOIN 2, and we'll describe that more in detail. So I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Ducharme. She will guide us through what is JCOIN and why we are doing this initiative. So Laurie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Faye. And thank you everyone for being here today and for your interest in this program. So as Faye said, before we get started, I'm just going to give a little bit of background context about the JCOIN initiative and how this JRIG small grants program fits into it. JCOIN is the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network. It is a NIDA funded initiative supporting research to address the overdose crisis in criminal legal settings and in populations directly impacted by the criminal legal system. JCOIN represents the largest single investment that the National Institutes of Health has ever made in health-related research in the criminal legal system, and it supports research on substance use and overdose prevention, treatment, and recovery support services. Through JCOIN, NIDA has funded a very large portfolio of research studies ranging from large multi-site clinical trials to small pilot studies and everything in between, including simulation and geospatial modeling projects, public opinion surveys, policy landscape research, secondary data analyses, and national surveys of jails and prisons, courts, and other service delivery settings. Broadly speaking, JCOIN has 5 major goals. So since we are a research agency, goal number 1 is to conduct research that will help generate evidence about what works in terms of interventions and service delivery models and how to implement what works in the real world. We support a collaborative network where researchers engage directly with practitioners to set research priorities and answer practical questions. We are on our way, I think, to becoming a go-to resource for both researchers and practitioners who are working at the intersection of addiction services and criminal justice. We want to continue to build capacity to conduct research, so deepening our bench of experts who can do research in these settings and apply the results of research in routine practice. And then finally, we want to create feedback loops so that practitioners' experience feeds into what we study and helps us speed the translation of science into practical solutions. Next slide. The JRIG program aligns with 3 of these goals. We're conducting research, we're building capacity to do research in the broader community, and we're building feedback loops between research and practice. Next slide. So we have made this huge investment in all of these JCOIN studies. And so why did we include the JRIG Small Grants Program as part of this initiative? And it's because we wanted and needed a funding mechanism that is much more nimble and flexible, and to be able to capitalize on research opportunities that might emerge organically in the field over the life of the initiative. We want to be able to study innovation that is happening in the real world every day. So some of the best ideas we know for addressing our public health challenges come from people who are out there on the front lines, who are just doing their best to try and figure out things on their own every day. And if we can provide some resources to collect data about those programs, then we can really assess whether and how and why they work. And that can inform larger efforts to bring those programs to scale in other areas, so that each agency is not always having to reinvent a new wheel to solve the same problem. And so we envisioned JRIG as an opportunity to collect pilot or feasibility data on some promising interventions or service delivery models, to conduct evaluations of local programs, or to study the impacts of new or changing local policies on service delivery and program outcomes. And there's a variety of topics that these grants can support, which we'll talk more about, but that was our thinking when we first designed this program. This is a mechanism that can support research that is either not a good fit for an NIH grant, or for a project that NIH simply can't fund quickly enough. I will be the first to admit that the NIH process can be quite slow, and it's also hard to navigate if you're in an organization that does not have a big research infrastructure and lots of experience. So while JRIG is funded by NIDA, it's directly administered through the JCOIN Coordination and Translation Center. There is still a rigorous process behind the evaluation and selection of these awards, but the Coordination Center can move much more quickly than traditional NIH grant processes. Another benefit of the JRIG program is that it allows us to extend the reach of the JCOIN initiative to systems and states and investigators that are not already involved in the network. Next slide. And then finally, just from a NIDA perspective, I think it's important to be clear about what JRIG is not. This program is not meant to be used as a source of supplemental funding or bridge funding for an existing NIH grant. So if you already have a grant from NIH, you should use regular NIH funding channels for adding on to that program. Talk to your program officer about an administrative supplement, for example. Our focus with JRIG is on how can we best provide timely support for new investigators with new ideas in new systems or settings that we are not already supporting and are not a good fit for our traditional NIH mechanisms. And JRIG is also not appropriate for studying topics that are unrelated to overdose in the context of the criminal legal system. You really need to be focused on that intersection. The funding that supports JCOIN, and by definition also JRIG, is there to help us learn how best to reduce overdose risk and improve connections to substance use services for people who are involved in the criminal legal system, whether they are detained or in the community. So with all that context in mind, I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues at the JCOIN Coordination Center, and they will walk you through the details of how all of this works.
Okay, thanks, Lori, for that great introduction and explanation of how we even came to be. During the first 5 years of JRIG, we funded 13 projects for about $1.4 million. So we have had some effect with people. We really are, as she said, a rapid funding mechanism so that we can support small things. We are important both for research, which we always think about, but also for evaluating interventions that might address practices that will help to prevent or help with the treatment of overdose and addiction. And very importantly, we are open to both researchers and practitioners. So these are just a few of the basic things about JRIG. Most projects we expect to be 6 to 24 months, 24 months being the maximum that you could ask for. encourage pilot studies, feasibility studies, evaluations, anything that's going to help work towards reducing overdose and addiction. A couple of questions that we get quite a bit, so I'll address them right now, is you do not have to have a quantitative design. Both qualitative research or evaluation as well as quantitative, both are appropriate, as long as you have the right questions that you're trying to ask. We also do not have a specific minimum sample size. The projects we funded in our first 5 years had anywhere from 30 to 7,500 subjects. So there's a wide variety there. And so that might help you with some of your planning as well. Next slide, please. Just to give you the most basic of information here, we will be giving funds out twice a year, starting in the spring of 2025, so that we'll have a spring cycle and a fall cycle. Each cycle lasts in total about 6 months. We'll start with a call for proposals. An announcement will go out indicating that the call for proposals is open. And you can see there the dates for each cycle. We plan to use these same dates for the entire JRIG period. If you are going to request technical assistance, we ask that you do that no later than the dates provided here, February 9th for the spring cycle, so that you have about 5 weeks to prepare. July 6th for the fall cycle, again, 5 weeks to prepare. The application closing date is, please note, not just the date, but 11:59 Eastern Time. So for those of you who are further west, be aware of that. Funding decisions, we anticipate about 2 months later, and you'll see the reason why that takes a little bit of time as we progress through this. And then actual awards out with money starting to flow in July or December, depending on your cycle. Now, I do want to note that any of those specific dates that fall on a weekend or a holiday will move to the next business day. So, for instance, as we go on through, you'll find that both January 5th and February 9th are on on Sundays. So the actual opening date for this particular 2025 spring cycle will be January 6th, with technical assistance requests no later than February 10th. But we want to keep these as our base dates and just move when we need to. Next slide, please. Our focus really is on research and or evaluation to study or identify approaches to improve the situations for people in criminal legal settings with SUD and at risk of overdose. This does not mean that people need to be incarcerated at this particular time or that your study must be in a carceral setting. No, it's as long as they're within the criminal legal settings in some manner. Along with that, we often see that many of the issues are related to social determinants of health. So that might be something to consider as you are working on your proposals. I won't read you all of these potential topics, but listed here are some of the topics, but we don't want you to feel that these are all the topics that we specifically want. They're just examples. Okay, next slide, please. To add to those samples, this list here, and again, I won't read them all to you, but these are some of the titles of projects that were funded during the first 5 years of JRIG. So there was quite a variety of types, breadth. Some of these dealt with a small geographic area. Some, you can see the very first one, dealt with a whole statewide system. So it's quite broad. Next slide, please. Some other things that came out of this very first set of JRIG awardees were a number of articles in peer-reviewed journals, more to come, we already know. 18 oral presentations or poster presentations at national and regional conferences. All of these were based specifically on their research with JRIG, including one R01 that was based on preliminary work done with JRIG. We know there are at least 2 more applications that will be submitted shortly. And then some people got more funding as well. And you can see on the right there a quote from one of our JRIG awardees about the benefits those funds provided to her. Next slide, please. One of the things that's changed in this second go-round for JRIG is the amount of funding. It is now up to $135,000. That's total costs. So it needs to include both your direct costs and your indirect costs, also known as facilities and administration costs. If your agency has an official federally approved F&A percentage for indirects, that's what you should use when you calculate your budget. If you do not have a formal F&A agreement, you should charge no more than 10% for those costs. Another change with this is we are now cost reimbursable. So invoices are submitted quarterly with explanations of those costs. Also, just as a reminder, there's no problem if you need a secondary entity to help you with some of the research, but the primary awardee cannot be the one who provides a subcontract. So if funded and you have basically 2 separate awards now, George Mason University will provide 2 separate subawards, one to your agency and one to the secondary agency. And there are much more complete details about how this will work in the call for proposals. Don't forget too, budget justification for every item. Next slide, please. There are also reporting requirements. The quarterly reports will give us an update on your accomplishments and any challenges. We will look for those in part to make sure that you are making progress, but also to see if there are any challenges that you might need help with. There is a template for the quarterly report, so it's very easy to fill out. And I'll also note that quarterly invoices are paid only if the quarterly reports are submitted and accepted. There's also a requirement for a final report. It's due 60 days after you complete your project. There is no template for that. We would ask for something that is not a huge, long, tome, but something that focuses on the findings and what those findings really mean. Next slide, please. If you or your team, I'm going to need technical assistance. That's where my colleague Howard Henderson and his colleagues come in. So I'm going to turn it over to him for a moment.
Thank you so much for that, Judith. I appreciate you laying it out for us and setting it up so that I can sort of walk through this and provide more detail to this. As Judith said and Faye mentioned earlier, I'm Howard Henderson. I'm the Technical and Training Assistance Corps lead for this project based out of Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas, alongside my team who is also here on the call with us. Let me start by addressing those who might consider technical assistance. You know the feeling that you have when you are staring at a blank research proposal and you're wondering where to begin. Or maybe you have a brilliant research idea at this intersection of justice and substance abuse disorders, but you could use some help with the methodology. That's exactly why we are here. Here's what we find compelling about this process that's been created. We've made it as straightforward as possible. If you decide you want or need technical assistance, You only need to complete the first 3 sections of the call for proposals. That's it. We don't need you to have everything figured out at the beginning. That's literally why we are here. Now, let's talk about this 2-page project summary. Yes, I think you heard it right. Just 2 pages. I know some of you may be thinking only 2 pages, but trust me, it's enough to get us started. But here's what you need to see, and we need to see in those 2 pages. Number 1 is the purpose of your research or evaluation project, your aims and questions that need answers, and a brief description of your team, who your PI is, and who the other key personnel are. On this webinar, we obviously have several of you who have done this before and you're experts in it. That's good, but we also have those who don't have the experience but have the interest and the passion. Don't worry, we have you covered. As Judith mentioned, there are 2 deadlines that we need to focus on. One is February 9th for the spring cycle, and the other is July 6th for the fall cycle. And yes, if either of those falls on a weekend or holiday, it moves to the next business day. We're reasonable people and we also enjoy our weekends. Next slide. Now, let me walk you through briefly what happens after you submit your proposal. This is kind of where our team jumps in and springs into action. First off, we will contact you within 48 hours of you reaching out. We don't really believe in leaving you hanging. We understand what it's like to be there waiting on assistance. When you reach out, we will respond by reviewing your request in detail. We'll have a conversation with you to clarify what your specific needs are. And we'll also begin to work with senior JCOIN personnel to identify the perfect senior researcher to assist you on the project. Let me emphasize something important about the senior researcher matching process. Think of it sort of like a research matchmaking service. We don't just randomly assign you to someone. We carefully consider your project-specific needs to make sure that you are paired with a senior researcher who has relevant expertise in the area. Now, I'm willing to be transparent about something, though, because technical assistance doesn't guarantee funding. I know, I get it. I wish it did, but I think what it does is it guarantees that you'll have experienced guidance to help you develop your proposal into a stronger possible form. Think of it this way. If you were training for a marathon, would you rather train alone or have someone who has experience to guide you in this process? That's sort of what we offer. Experienced research coaches who know the course and can help you prepare effectively. As I wrap this up, I think I want to leave you with this. Number 1, don't hesitate to reach out for technical assistance. Sometimes researchers feel like, we should have everything figured out before asking for help. That's really not how this works. We're here specifically to help you develop your ideas and strengthen your proposal. Our team at Texas Southern University Center for Justice Research and part of the JCOIN project, we're committed to helping you navigate this process successfully. We want to see your team, we want to see your ideas, and we're here to make that happen. Essentially, we're here to walk with you down this research path. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. Yep. Okay, this is going to be a fairly quick walkthrough, but there are 10 sections in the proposal that you'll need to work on. And so I'm just going to try and give you a quick overview of what's in each of those, just to give you an idea. Much of this is, well, all of this is in much further detail when you see the call for proposals. And much of it also, some of it is sort of fill in the blank or check a box. Other sections are sections that you will write and then you will upload into the portal. We have a specific portal for all applications. There is an area where you can submit a draft and let it sit there for a while, and then come back and make changes when you want to up until that final deadline. Or you may just choose to wait and submit it all at once. Either one is fine. The first part is very simple. It's a cover page. It is a fill in the blank and provide a checkbox. It gives us basic information about who is submitting, who the key personnel is, or what is the title of the project, what kinds of funds you're requesting, just something quick and easy. Part 2 is an abstract. This is a 500-word maximum overview of your entire project. And just in case you aren't aware, if you do this in Word, it will give you a word count because we will check those words. Part 3 is the TA request that Howard just went through with you. And if you are requesting it, these are the only 3 parts you have to do: the cover page, the abstract, and your actual request for technical assistance. The project narrative is part 4. It has a 5-page maximum plus the reference list. So your list of citations is not included as part of that 5 pages. The areas that you should focus on here: significance and importance, what the project will study and why, innovation, why is this something new and different? What is new and different about it? What approach you'll use, which is where we get into the research or evaluation design. Those 3 are 3 of the 4 sections for which you will actually get points. And so I'll come back to that in a little bit. If this is a revision, we do allow you to take a proposal that you've submitted to us, to JRIG in the past that was not funded, and revise it for a resubmittal, but you can only do that once. So if you do that, we ask for a 1/2 page explanation of what you changed, just so it was easier to identify those changes. The next one is the characteristics of the study population, looking at gender and race or ethnicity. And these we know may be a guess for some of you, but if you could do the best you can, even with extant data to give us that information, it's very helpful. Next slide, please. Part 6 is human subjects protection. This basically is a description of institutional research boards and what their requirements are, and the fact that we can help you with that if you don't have your own IRB within your institution. Part 7 is bio sketches of each of the key personnel with a 2-page maximum. And I will let you know now, this is one of the areas that does tend to be a problem occasionally. And the problem usually is writing more than 2 pages. If you write more than 2 pages, you will get a note back from me saying, please get this down to 2 pages. We ask that you use the form that NIH has on their website, and within the call for proposals, you will find the URL for that form and the instructions for completing it. The budget and budget justification do not have a page limit. That is part 8 of this whole application process. It can be submitted in a variety of formats. It is another of the sections that you will upload, one of the several. So you could put it in Word, PDF, Excel. We do provide a table that you can use, but you don't need to use that. If you have one you use, that's fine as well. Each item must have a written justification of why you want this funding. If you have funding for travel, that's a special place to be sure to explain. For instance, if you're going to a conference, we don't want to fund a conference for you to meet with colleagues and learn from them, but we will help you with funding if you are going to present a paper that came out of your JRIG process. Written justification for each of these. Part 9 is the letters of collaboration. If you have another entity that is working with you, you should have a letter that includes what they are going to do and their agreement to do that, and a signed letter. So that's part 9 only if you have a collaboration. Part 10, the last one, is demographic information for the PI. And this is basically so that we know that we are reaching a variety of people. There is a section 11. It is informational only. There's nothing that you need to complete in that. Next slide, please. You might also be aware of or be questioning what happens after you submit that proposal. It doesn't just go into a big black hole. First thing that happens as soon as you submit it is that it has an administrative review. This review does not look at the quality of anything that you've written. What its purpose is to make sure that your bio sketches are the right length, that you each of those 10 sections you have written something for. If there is a problem, like a bio sketch is 3 pages, you'll get a note asking you to resubmit that portion in the correct format, in the correct length. So you do have, a couple days to fix things. Ultimately, each proposal is read by 3 independent reviewers. 2 of them will be researchers and 1 will be a practitioner. There's a quote here on the right from one of our reviewers. These scores, you will be scored on the 3 sections that I mentioned earlier: significance and importance, innovation and approach. Those are 3 of the sections that you'll be writing about. You will also be scored regarding the bio sketches of the key team members of your team. Those 4 together, each area will be scored on a 1 to 9 basis, with lower scores being better. I'll also note that these 3 independent reviewers will all have to sign that they do not have any conflict of interest with any paper that they are reviewing. Those scores ultimately lead to an impact score, which is where we start looking at those that will be funded and those that we will recommend potentially for future. The best proposals go to a second review panel, and these are the principal investigators from other parts within JCOIN. They will recommend generally 1 or 2 for funding in each cycle. However, the important part, in a way, from all of this after the proposal is submitted piece is this one. Every author will get a summary statement. That summary statement provides every score and every comment from the first level reviewers. This, if you are need to revise and resubmit, looking at those will be very key to what you want to do. You can resubmit 1 time at any time in the future for JRIG. George Mason University will then prepare the contracting documents. That can take up to a month, but still we're usually within that 6-month overall time frame. Next slide, please. We have created a number of documents that are up and ready for you to look at any time that may be helpful. These documents include a 1-page description of JRIG with the table of key dates on it. I think the title of that, when you go to look for it, is 1-pager. We have a sample proposal for you that goes through all these parts. However, I will point out that this sample proposal really and truly is for illustrative purposes only. It is not meant to show you what the best possible proposal looks like. It does not have the best of research or evaluation designs in it, but it can give you an overview of what everything will look at. We have a page of frequently asked questions that is already up. For those of you who put questions into the Q&A for us to answer now, those may well be added to that set of FAQs. We have tips for writing a successfully funded proposal. and also a proposal checklist that is very specific to JRIG itself, so that all of these are ready for you to look at any time. There also are interesting things so that you can learn more about JCOIN. If you register to be part of JCOIN-CTC, then there's no cost for that. The URL is right there for you, and that's a good place to not only learn more about JCOIN, but also to find out more about online classes we have, seminars, webinars, and so on. Lots of things that may be helpful for you in the future. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, very specifically, to give you the dates for the next 2 cycles, which are the 2025 cycles. For cycle 9, and saying that the first cycle for this is cycle 9 may sound odd, but we had 8 cycles during JRIG 1.0, so we're just continuing the numbering system to keep it easy for us. Cycle 9, the call for proposals, will be available January 6th, 2025. Requests for TA will need to come in by February 10th, 2025, and proposals will be due on April 1st, 2025. Similar dates down below for cycle 10, so that these are the actual dates. Generally, the actual call for proposals will be available when the call for proposal is open. So as an example, cycle 9, the call for proposals will be available January 6th, and it will close on April 1st. So that gives you a good amount of time to write for these. As Howard said, we recognize that many of you are going to be early writers, that you may not have a lot of experience, and we are ready to help you with that in any way that you can, that we can help you. Next slide, please. If you have questions, we'll be looking for those that might be in the Q&A box. But we also have a general JRIG email address that's there, where any kind of questions you want, about JRIG, you can send in there and we will respond quickly. If you have some very specific questions about the call for proposals, you can write to me personally with that email address. If you have questions of Howard and his colleagues on training and technical assistance and what they might do to help you, his email address is here as well. So I hope that we've been able to give you some ideas of what's going on with JRIG and how we can help you and what is available.